This evening on Money Matters, when will the Malaysian economy recover, and are we still on track for a V-shaped recovery? How will the government finance the stimulus packages? Can we expect more taxes? We have with us in the studio Dato Tengku Zafrul Aziz to answer these questions. I'm Zahir Kelvinong Abdullah, your host for Money Matters. On the 10th of March, Dato Tengku Zafrul Aziz was appointed Finance Minister, and a week later, our country went into the Movement Control Order, or MCO, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Stimulus packages were announced during the MCO, Penjana and Prihatin, to address the urgent needs of the people. So are we expecting more assistance from the government? Are we on track for a V-shaped recovery? Finance Minister Dato Tengku Zafrul Aziz is with me now. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kelvin.
Before we get into those questions which I said just now, when you were appointed as Finance Minister a week on the 10th of March, and a week later the MCO was implemented, so there were immense challenges obviously due to that. Some quarters were given the opinion that it was timely that a non-politician but a banker was appointed as finance minister, basically to get the country through the crisis. Was this added pressure on you making the transition from the corporate sector to the government?
Well, to be very honest, Kevin, it's now been more than, probably close to 4 months of being with the government, in the government. I first came in on the 10th of March. I really didn't know what to expect. As you rightly said, we were in the midst of fighting this COVID-19, and a week later, MCO happened. But what really surprised me, of course, I'm very humbled by the appointment, but what really surprised me is the ability of Malaysians to unite on this. Right? In the Ministry of Finance, for example, my colleagues at Ministry of Finance was working, very hard during this period. On the 18th day of my so-called tenureship as a Minister of Finance, after just 18 days, we announced Prihatin, right? And that was the work of all my colleagues at Cabinet and also the government, relevant government ministries.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now, the thing on everybody's mind here, because obviously there's been a lot of positive messages being sent out by the government, but obviously what's on the Rakyat's mind right now is, what is the timeline for the recovery, and are we expecting a V-shaped recovery?
Thank you. Well, I'm expecting a V-shaped recovery. We have seen how the economy has reopened on 4th of May when we announced the CMCO. And we have seen many Malaysians are back at work. Companies have started to reopen. And of course, it took time, right? We've seen how through the data that we have analyzed, a number of people start work, a number of people going onto public transport, and you've seen that the economy is slowly improving. Of course, we've seen as well the impact of the MCO to the economy. So that's why when we had this the CMCO on, after 4th of May when we reopened, right, we then relook at what we need to do to help restart the economy. If I have said this before, we have this 6R, right? So after we have resolve, resilience, and then we look at how we restart, is the next one, the 4th R is on recovery. Mm-hmm. So Penjana was about that. So it really depends on how we Malaysians and the economy recover during this period to have this V-shaped recovery. Mm-hmm. We've seen forecasts made by S&P, by Moody's, forecasts by IMF, World Bank, showing indicating that Malaysia will have a V-shaped recovery. And I'm also optimistic. This year's forecast for Malaysia, official forecast by Bank Negara, is between negative 2% to 0.5%. Right? But next year, if you look at the consensus, it's around 5%. So that's, to me, a positive sign that our economy will improve.
Mm-hmm. Now, you had mentioned just now that working with other ministries and the private sectors basically is to find the right solution, because obviously these are challenges that Malaysia has never seen before, and obviously the challenges are even greater for a finance minister. So how was this coordination done between the ministries and the private sector?
Well, if we look at Penjana, we are coordinating incentive, based on the incentive, the 40 incentives we have in Penjana. It's being coordinated with 53 ministries and implementing agencies. And we monitor it through Laksana. Of course, it's a teamwork. Support of all these 53 ministries and agencies are important. And what's also important is to measure not just the KPI, but the outcome. I'll give you an example. For example, when we announced that we will help the micro SMEs, we announced Grant Khas Prihatin, which is a grant given to SMEs, to micro SMEs, 3,000 ringgit each. We're targeting all the micro SMEs. There's around 600,000 micro SMEs in Malaysia. And the measurement and the KPI is not just to see whether the money amount is disbursed, but what have they done with it? Did they survive? How well? If they don't, why? So I think it's also key to, for us as the government to look at the effectiveness of those incentive and initiatives.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now you had mentioned Laksana, so let's talk about it. I think this is the first time that the finance minister has implemented this to utilize data and technology to ensure, if I'm not mistaken, better public delivery.
Yes.
What were the challenges for you to implement something like this? Because it is definitely something that we've never seen before.
Yeah, well, probably one of the main challenges will be a mindset change, right? It does mean that you have, in this case for us at the government and through Ministry of Finance, we report on a weekly basis the outcome of the implementation of those initiatives, both in Prihatin and Penjana. It started with Prihatin, continues now with Penjana. Mm-hmm. And if you look at what that means that you have to be accountable, right? It means that if you don't deliver, you must explain to the rakyat why you haven't delivered. But it also gives us the opportunity, the platform, to hear some of the issues, right? To get feedback. So I think that mindset has been a very positive one. I'm very happy to see all the relevant ministries and agencies cooperating and assisting to ensure that the delivery of this incentive and initiatives are, as planned. Right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's key. The other thing that is also key is the data. Right? The data that we collated then can be used to make sure that all the future initiatives are more targeted, right? Because we know that resources are scarce, and we also then realize that there will be industries, there will be segments of society that need help. And in terms of help, it will be different types of help. So I think data is going to be a very key, integral part of our decision making going forward.
Okay, thank you. We've got to go for a very quick break, and we'll be back very shortly with our finance minister, where when we come back, we'll talk about the moratorium.
Moratorium, okay.
Welcome back to Money Matters. We're talking to our Finance Minister, Dato Tengku Zafrul Aziz. Again, thank you for joining us on this program.
Thanks,
and you have stressed before that this is not a financial crisis and that banks are in a stronger position than before. And with the agreement of the banks to the 6-month moratorium, many groups have also asked for an extension of this, but you have also said that it's up to the banks. And of course, there are a couple of banks that said they will do it on a case-by-case basis. Now, as an ex-banker yourself, do you think that they should do it?
Okay, let me just recap. The moratorium started the 1st of April, will end 30th of September. the bank's position is strong compared to the last crisis that we faced, which was the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009. Our capital buffers now is around 121 billion. That's 3 times more than previously. So you're right, it's not a financial crisis. Whether the banks are able to continue, I think it really depends on each bank. So each bank will have a different issues and challenges they have to face. When we first, talked to the banks, and we were very happy. Bank Negara did a good job as well to convince the banks on the need for a moratorium. That we have done that. We still got 2 months to go. Whether they should continue or not, I think it's an engagement where it's happening today with the banks. I understand the challenges they face, but I also understand the challenges the Rakyat face. So we need to have a balance here. So I think the right balance will be to ensure that the people and the SMEs that still require the support, given the challenges they face in terms of cash flow, unemployment, some people have lost their jobs. I think it's important that banks look at this segment and help to restructure the loans. Having said that, those that are affected today also need to be mindful of their financial position. It's good to start engaging their respective banks. So my answer to you is, I think the best possible scenario for us after end of September is for banks to engage those customers who require their help, and they should try and give as much assistance as possible to them.
With the upcoming COVID law, would it be tied in with the moratorium as well?
Well, I can't comment on that. All I can say regarding the COVID law is a interim relief measure. It's going to be discussed at the cabinet very soon, and then brought to Parliament. Right? I think the aim of the COVID law is similar to, I believe, what has been implemented and announced in other countries like Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, and so it is aimed to help Malaysians.
Right. Okay, and you've mentioned about the SMEs as well, because obviously we see the SME sector basically as the pillar of strength for the economy. So are you looking at giving them any further assistance?
Yes, I think SME. Yes, in the sense that SMEs is a major contributor to the economy and also employment. In terms of economy, they contribute close to 40% to our GDP. Employment, they employ about 70% of our Malaysian working population. We have, therefore, in Penjana and also Prihatin, focus on this sector. If we look at SMEs and micro SMEs, we have helped close to 800,000 micro SMEs and SMEs in terms of SRF loans of around close to 10 billion, special relief fund given by Bank Negara through the banks. We've also given 1.1 billion ringgit of allocation of loans as well to micro SME, of which 700 of the loan is at 0% interest. We are, of course, the biggest initiative is actually the wage subsidy, which is again focused on the SME. That's around 2.5 million people have benefited from it, 300,000 companies, totaling so far we've disbursed 7 billion ringgit. Our allocation for that is close to 15 billion ringgit. So this has helped, I believe, the SME somewhat. But of course, this is unprecedented times, and we are facing a major challenge on the economic front. But all the help we can help SME, we will continue to help. This assistance still continues, and therefore, we'll monitor the progress of this assistance. But if the SMEs need further help, I think we need to sit down and be more targeted as well.
Right. But what has the feedback been from the SMEs to all these initiatives that you have implemented?
The feedback is generally very positive. Of course, there are industries that are affected more than others. People talk about tourism sector, for example. It was the first sector to be hit, and I believe could be the last to recover. So I think that we know they need more support. So we in Penjana then announced a special 1 billion fund to help the SME sector, for example. So this is areas where we need to look at. And of course, the other concern is about unemployment. We've seen unemployment going up. from 3.5% in end of March to 5% in end of April. And again, this is why we have announced allocation of 2 billion ringgit on reskilling and upskilling, and another 1.5 billion ringgit for hiring subsidies. And this should cover around 350,000 Malaysians.
But are you specifically looking at targeting certain sectors of the SMEs?
We will going to have to do that going forward. I must admit, in Prihatin was about survival, so everyone was really affected. That's why we had the Bantuan Prihatin Nasional (BPN) for the Malaysians, for both P40 and 40. We've given to close to 10.8 million people, amount of about 11.5 billion ringgit. And now under Penjana, we are more focused to help some of the sectors to really, if you look at this health crisis, it has affected nearly all sectors. And digitalization is going to be key. So that's why there's a lot of incentives on that front as well. It's doing business and living as well in the new normal, right? And the new normal can be a permanent normal as well.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at. But you had also mentioned just now about the tourism industry. So obviously it has been very badly hit. But it's also very good that we have strong domestic tourism, unlike other countries as well. But what do you think they need in the short or perhaps, let's look at short term.
Yeah.
What basically do they need?
Yeah. One is about confidence, right? Why I say confidence is because Malaysians need to go out there knowing that the SOPs are being practiced. Malaysians are very conservative, actually, when you look at versus the other countries in terms of survey that was done. And if you look at that, what does that mean? That means if Malaysians are confident that it's safe to go out there, then they will go out there. And this will help domestic tourism. So domestic tourism will be, in the short term, key as we yet to open the borders, right? So I hope the people do observe the right SOPs and therefore give the confidence for others to then support the tourism industry.
Okay. We are going for our final break right now. In the meantime, connect with us on Twitter and tell us your concerns about the economy. And when we come back, we'll speak to the Finance Minister regarding what we can expect from the upcoming budget. Welcome back to Money Matters. Dato, just now before we went for the break, you talked about the tourism industry. So just to add on a little bit to that, the problems that airlines are having right now, obviously some are asking for government bailouts or assistance or whatever. Are we doing anything to help the airlines in this situation?
Okay, if you look at the global airline industries, all airlines are having a tough time, right? Of course, includes all the airlines that are operating here in Malaysia as well. Both Malaysia Airlines and AirAsia are facing major challenges, probably challenges they've never faced before. As you know, wearing my government hat, I think what is important is for those airlines to seek commercial solutions. Today, when you said bailout, for me, for the government, I don't believe in bailing out shareholders. We may look at helping and assisting companies so that they continue to remain afloat. Employment continues to be there for Malaysians. But to bail out companies is something that I think is wrong, right? Today, so far, there's no requests yet from any airlines in Malaysia for government to give any financial or injection, direct financial injection to those airlines. So, for example, Malaysia Airlines have Khazanah as their shareholder. I think Khazanah, as a shareholder, 100% shareholder, will then look at how to resolve it without the government's involvement for now. And of course, Malaysia Airlines also, as a listed company, AirAsia as a listed company, will have their own set of challenges. They have shareholders as well to look at together with management on how to resolve their challenges.
Again, because of the current crisis, the talk has gone again to the possible mergers of the airlines. Are you in favor of something like this?
To me, mergers of airlines, mergers of banks, or mergers of any entities should be commercially driven. So I don't think any interference from a government should be there. So if the banks or airlines or oil and gas industries, any industries for that matter, it should be done based on commercial consideration.
Okay. Thank you for that. So moving on to the upcoming budget. Obviously, this would be something that will be watched by the whole rakyat. So what can we expect from the upcoming budget? Basically, what can you tell us?
Yeah. Well, the budget is the fifth R of the 6R for revitalized. Budget is still months away, targeted to be presented at Parliament on 6th of November. More focus, if I can give you a preview, will be on to drive new sources of growth and future-proofing Malaysia. I think that will be some of the key areas. But the main one is to really restore investor and consumer confidence to drive the economy in 2021. Because 2021 will be the year where we want to sustain the growth that we hope to achieve in the fourth quarter and the third quarter of this year. That's why if you look at the forecast by the World Bank, IMF, the rating agencies, by analysts, is that Malaysia will post a stronger growth in 2021. So the budget must be there to accommodate that and facilitate that growth.
Now, looking at what you've mentioned, obviously the government will face low tax revenues. So are you looking how to increase tax revenues? Are we looking at new sources of taxes?
Now the focus is really on making sure that the economy recovers. And I have stated this before, we expect the budget deficit to increase because of that. Like you rightly said, revenue will suffer, right? Tax collection will go down, given the challenges that the companies are facing today. So therefore, we have assumed and forecast budget deficit to rise to between 5.8 to 6%, and this will be funded mainly by borrowings from the government. So then, the good thing is, if you notice, the Prihatin and Pejana, the measures are very much a one-off and temporary in nature. So next year, those measures will not appear again. And that fiscal injection of about 45 billion ringgit will not appear again in next year's budget. So then, mathematically, it will go down in terms of our borrowings. With the assumption of growth next year in GDP growth, then revenue will also go up, right? As companies and the economy does better, the collection will be better. So this hopefully will start, us on the track to go back to the below 4% budget deficit level that we've achieved before.
Right. Business analysts have also said that they are concerned about Malaysia's declining revenue from one of our main revenue generators, obviously, which is oil, which is obviously due to the pandemic, because the price of oil has dropped to levels which we have not seen in decades, record lows or whatever. So are we looking at how basically we can address this?
Yeah. Well, that's a longer-term issue that we need to address. Having said that, oil prices have recovered from its bottom, right? It is due to a function of demand. The global demand for oil because of the pandemic has declined, but then has picked up recently as global economy slowly opens up. It was down at 20 and the futures were even negative, right? Today it's now up back to $40. So it really depends on how the global economy recovers.
Right. The PM has mentioned that mega projects will continue, LRT3, MRT, but obviously the cost has to be controlled. How are you managing this?
Yeah. LRT3, MRT2, ECRL, the fiberization plans, all that will continue. The costs, whatever that has been committed, will continue. It is important because all these mega projects actually adds to 1% of our GDP. Just like Pejana and Prihatin adds up to at least 3% to our GDP. So the country needs to spend, the country needs to invest to stimulate back the economy.
Right. Looking at external factors outside Malaysia, the World Bank has said that the global economy will shrink by about 3%. So have you basically put into safeguards to making sure that we are on track to ensuring that our economy recovers as part of your plan?
Yeah. So the external factors remain important to us as an open and trading economy like Malaysia, as an open and trading economy like Malaysia. But having said that, we're seeing that global economy is opening up. forecast by international analysts, by World Bank and IMF, shows that next year's world growth will be positive, right? So what's important is for us to ensure that investments continue to come in to Malaysia. Supply chain was disrupted, global supply chain was disrupted due to the pandemic, but we should then take advantage and leverage of our position as an investment destination. China will be key, and China has shown that it's been a resilient economy and it's on its way to a stronger growth next year. So we should also leverage off the economic linkages with China.
Right. Final question before we go. Are we prepared if we were to have a second wave for the pandemic?
Well, Kelvin, I hope we don't. That's why I keep reminding my colleagues and fellow Malaysians not to be complacent. Right? We've seen it happen before in other countries, and Malaysians so far have been observing good SOP, safety protocols. The reason why we dare to open the economy is because we've met the 6 conditions by WHO. And if we look at our health capacity, it is actually below 15% utilized. So our health capacity is not under stress.
Right.
So as long as that's in place, we shouldn't be worried.
Okay. So obviously, if there was to be a second wave, many other sectors will be involved. So, you haven't actually said whether there is a plan in place if there was to be a second wave.
Yeah. If there's a second wave, definitely there is a plan. But that's why Penjana, like as I said, is a dynamic and agile plan. We need to ensure that whatever comes, we must be ready. All right. It is not any plans cannot no longer be just a static plan. It has to be a dynamic and agile plan.
Right. Dato Sri, thank you very much for being on Money Matters, and we hope to see you back on this program very shortly.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That's all the time we have for this week. If you have any questions or comments on the show, find us on Twitter. I hope today's discussion provided you with money insights that matters, and we will see you again next week.